North Korea has crashed America's July 4th party with fireworks of its own, successfully launching a missile it claims can hit anywhere in the world. Well, anywhere is an exaggeration, and there's no indication that Kim Jong-un's missile can deliver a nuclear warhead yet. But the latest U.S. assessment suggests this was a more advanced missile, traveling farther than any previous test. Experts say the missile could reach Alaska, and the launch sent U.S. officials into urgent meetings today to assess the growing threat and weigh options for responding. President Trump's initial response was to fire back with a tweet asking about Kim Jong-un, quote, "Does this guy have anything better to do with his life?" We're waiting to hear from the president at a White House picnic for military families, but the North Korean launch comes as he prepares for a critical overseas trip. It includes talks with the leaders of Japan and China and his first meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That meeting has been upgraded from a pull-aside chat to a formal bilateral sit-down meeting, and Putin and China's President Xi met in Moscow today, freezing President Trump out of their proposed solution, calling for a freeze on North Korean missile and nuclear tests, but also on U.S. military exercises with South Korea. I'll talk to Congressman Tom Suozzi of the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees and our correspondents, specialists, and guests standing by with full coverage of the day's top stories. North Korea's missile launch has set off an urgent U.S. effort to identify the nature of the threat and to come up with a response. The initial analysis has chilling implications. We begin with CNN Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr. Barbara, what are you learning?
Good afternoon, Brianna. The Trump administration spending its July 4th in meetings, still trying to figure out how to respond to this North Korean missile test. Increasingly, it looks like it was an intercontinental ballistic missile.
These are the first images of the North Korean missile launch the U.S. never wanted to see. U.S. officials calculate this is likely a two-stage intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM, that could someday hit parts of the United States. U.S. spy satellites for days had picked up imagery of a potential KN-17 missile launch, like this one launched in May, being readied. Now, the latest assessments suggest the new launch was a more advanced missile that traveled farther than any previous missile test. The South Korean and U.S. military estimates the missile traveled more than 580 miles in 37 minutes. Based on this, experts calculate the missile could have a maximum range of roughly 4,160 miles, long enough to reach all of Alaska, but not the rest of the U.S.
You have to remember that missile technology has been around for a long time, so there are no particular secrets. A lot of it is just figuring out how to do the hard engineering and basically get everything to work at the same time, which is not always easy to do.
The new launch comes as North Korea also continues to pursue the development of a nuclear warhead.
Combining nuclear warheads with ballistic missile technologies in the hands of Kim Jong-un is a recipe for disaster. So I must take him at his word. I must assume that his claims are true. I know his aspirations certainly are.
Top officials from the State Department, the Pentagon, and the White House held meetings throughout the July 4th holiday. Administration officials emphasizing diplomacy, but with tensions rising, everything is on the table.
I think essentially everyone agrees, and I believe the Trump administration agrees as well, that there are no good military options. So if you take the military option off the table, you come back to sanctions. We've seen in the past it's not going to solve the problem.
The Russian and Chinese presidents offering up another solution at their meeting in Moscow, announcing they'll work together to freeze the North Korean program, but demanding a stop to U.S. South Korean military exercises and an end to the THAAD missile defense deployment to South Korea, both non-starters for the U.S.
There is, of course, the whole question of the Korean Peninsula, the building of peace and stability. It is very important to push forward our joint initiative on settling the Korean problem with a view of immediately freezing the ballistic missile strikes and also dealing with the U.S. deployment of weapons in South Korea.
U.S. military commanders recently had updated military options specifically to be able to give President Trump some ideas about what he could do for a rapid response to any North Korean action. Now, tonight, commanders tell us there's no contemplation of any kind of conflict, but they are ready to up the U.S. presence on the peninsula if they are asked to by the White House. Brianna?
Barbara Starr for us at the Pentagon, and we are standing by live at this moment, waiting for President Trump. He is going to be there along with some military families on the south lawn of the White House, and we expect for him to speak live. You can see there at the lectern, and we're going to bring that to you as soon as he begins speaking. Meantime, North Korea's missile launch has sent U.S. officials into urgent huddles on this holiday on how to respond. This comes as President Trump is preparing for a crucial overseas trip that includes his first meeting with Russia's President Putin. I want to turn now to CNN's Ryan Nobles. He is at the White House. This is a lot for the president to juggle this week as North Korea is sending a loud message, Ryan.
That's right, Brianna. And now we know that this meeting with Vladimir Putin is officially a bilateral event. That means it's going to get a much greater public focus, and it could mean that both sides are open to cooling off diplomatic ties. As Donald Trump prepares for the second overseas trip of his presidency, rising tensions around the globe are raising the stakes for his meetings with world leaders at the G20 summit in Germany. From yet another missile launch by North Korea, to ongoing conflicts in Syria and Ukraine, and the growing international threat from ISIS and terrorism. But nothing will likely get as much attention as Trump's face-to-face meeting Friday with Russian President Vladimir Putin. An encounter that will now be a formal bilateral discussion, the first between the two countries' presidents in nearly 2 years.
If Putin likes Donald Trump, I consider that an asset, not a liability, because we have a horrible relationship with Russia.
But the Trump administration is hopeful for a breakthrough.
Our relationship with Russia is not different from any other country in terms of us communicating to them really what our concerns are, where we see problems in the relationship, but also opportunities.
The meeting comes amid an ongoing special counsel investigation and multiple congressional probes into Russia's meddling in the U.S. election, though it's not clear if the issue will be raised when the leaders meet. Instead, administration officials tell CNN the president plans to focus the time on Syria and Ukraine. Trump will also meet with China's President Xi Jinping, a discussion that will be critical after North Korea's latest missile test and recent U.S. sanctions against a Chinese bank for allegedly aiding North Korea.
The era of strategic patience with the North Korean regime has failed. Many years, and it's failed. And frankly, that patience is over.
Trump signaled his impatience with the regime during a meeting with South Korea's leader a week ago. Last night on Twitter, he went a step further, specifically calling on the leaders in the region to do more, writing, quote, "North Korea has just launched another missile. Does this guy have anything better to do with his life? Hard to believe that South Korea and Japan will put up with this much longer. Perhaps China will put a heavy move on North Korea and end this nonsense once and for all." And of course, this all comes on the heels of the death of American student Otto Warmbier, who was imprisoned by the North Koreans and then returned back to the States in a condition of being in a coma. And of course, don't forget, Brianna, that when President Obama met with President Trump, he warned the incoming president that North Korea would be among his biggest challenges.
Ryan Nobles at the White House, thank you. We do have some breaking news right now. The United States is now requesting a UN Security Council meeting on North Korea. This is a request that was made by U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. I want to get more information now from CNN Chief National Security Correspondent Jim Sciutto. So, Jim, what does it tell you that the U.S. is calling this a probable ICBM? That certainly makes it sound like this is very serious and there's a high state of alarm.
No question. Listen, the U.S. may not believe that North Korea is there today with being able to put a nuclear weapon at the tip of an ICBM, that is a missile that could cross continents and hit, crucially, the United States. But they believe they're making crucial progress virtually every day, every week, with all of these missile tests you've seen, all of these nuclear tests, and crucially miniaturizing a nuclear weapon. A key question for this test today is what condition was that vehicle when it came down to Earth? It's called the re-entry vehicle. That's the thing that would carry the nuclear weapon if they were able to put it on a target. They were able to launch this very high up, send it a great distance, and it splashed down. It made it back to the Earth. What condition that's in, that's an open question, but there is no question, Brianna, that North Korea is making progress every week, every day, and they're getting closer to being what successive administrations, Democrats and Republicans, have said they would never let happen, and that has become a nuclear power.
And the president tweeted, Jim, he suggested that China put, quote, a heavy move on North Korea. What's he trying to do here?
Well, what's interesting about that tweet, he said Japan and South Korea, they're running out of patience, and maybe China will do something. This is, frankly, a different message from the president early on in his administration or even during the campaign when he would said, if I'm president, in effect, I'll take care of this. I'll be tougher. That tweet with this latest missile test seems to place the onus not on the U.S., but on China, South Korea, and Japan. And, of course, South Korea and Japan don't have the military capability that the U.S. does or the economic muscle that the U.S. does. And China has kind of questionable allegiances here in that they are a North Korean ally who sometimes applies pressure on North Korea, and sometimes that pressure is not as great as the U.S. or other Western powers want. So it's a curious question there. Is Donald Trump, in effect, saying, listen, it's up to you? Remains to be seen.
Yeah, it did seem odd that he was saying maybe South Korea and Japan won't put up with this, considering they do rely so much on the U.S. Jim Sciutto, thank you so much for that. Joining me now to talk more about this is Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi of New York. And I do want to let you know, sir, we are certainly awaiting President Trump, who's going to be at the White House. So if he does speak, we're going to jump out, go listen to what he said, and we'll have you react to that as well. I do want to ask you, though, about something that the president said when he took office in January. Actually, before he took office in January, he tweeted, North Korea just stated that it is in the final stages of developing a nuclear weapon capable of reaching parts of the U.S. It won't happen. Is that a promise that he can keep at this point?
Well, it's happening, and it's going to happen, and it's been progressing for decades, long before Donald Trump, and it's gotten a lot more serious over the past 6 months as we've seen more and more tests every single week. The president has always told us that his philosophy is he doesn't want to share his strategy and that he's going to be tough. But we need to know what the strategy is as to how we're going to deal with this, not only as the United States, but in the community of nations.
It seems like the options are evaporating in a way. Is there anything that can be done to stop North Korea at this point? I've even heard military experts say you may have to think about a diplomatic solution and going farther on relations than the U.S. would have ever stomached before.
Yeah, well, obviously, Japan and South Korea have a huge self-interest in making sure that North Korea doesn't become nuclear capable, more than they are so now. China and Russia don't want to see the Korean Peninsula ever become unified again. They don't want to see the United States have the influence it now does in the Asian theater. So everybody's always going to be acting out of their self-interest here. North Korea is a bad actor. They're not going to do any favors for us. They're not going to respond just because the president does tough tweets. This meeting this week is essential for the president to demonstrate that we're going to be great friends to our allies and build closer relationships with our allies, and we're going to be able to negotiate with those folks that are not our allies and try and stand strong up against them, but recognizing they're not going to do it because they like the president. They're not going to do it because they think he's tough. They're going to be doing it based upon what's in their self-interest and what they can get away with at a negotiating table.
But if they don't, they don't want North Korea to be a nuclear power at this point, is there anything that the U.S. can do diplomatically or militarily? It sounds like a lot of experts are saying, look, many military solutions aren't going to fly. They're untenable. But the idea of at least mobilizing military in the region, are there any of these options that you see?
Well, we've always known that China and Russia, we thought they wouldn't want to see a nuclearized North Korea. We've always believed that that's in their self-interest. However, China could be doing a lot more to hold North Korea economically accountable. So it's really a matter of figuring out what everybody's self-interest. Our interests are clearly aligned with Japan and South Korea, so we've got to team up. China and Russia want to have the outsized influence in that region more than the United States of America. We've been there for 50 years. Now we hear talk about trying to get us to stop our military operations with South Korea in that area as something they want us to give up. That's a big thing to give up by the United States of America, and it would be very detrimental, I believe, to our great ally of South Korea and to Japan.
All right, Congressman, I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt you just so that we can listen to President Trump, and
the
we'll be back
president always
after
does this to me.
Happy 4th of July, everybody. Thank you very much.
President Trump hosting military families there at the White House ahead of the fireworks, telling them that he will always have their backs. I want to bring back Congressman Tom Suozzi now. He is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, so you're also a member of the Armed Services Committee. So in that light, as you look at this event and you hear the president's message to military families, what's your reaction?
Well, you know, the president has done a great job giving a very simple, straightforward message throughout his campaign and now as president that he supports our military. And I think that that is not a partisan thing. That's not Democratic or Republican. And we need to always make clear in a bipartisan way that we need to support our men and women in uniform.
As you look forward on this holiday and you look at some of certainly the concerns, and we have these added challenges, even just when you think about what's going on with North Korea today and in Syria and all of these pressing foreign policy issues. Is there a different message or a more reassurance to military families that you'd like to give, or that you think government officials should be giving?
I think that when it comes to the military and when it comes to veterans and when it comes to every single issue in this country, everybody's sick and tired of the politics. These are life and death issues. People putting their life on the line, whether it's Afghanistan and terrorism, or North Korea and Russia, or it's here at home with healthcare and jobs. These are life and death issues for people, and we need to stop politics from being so small and so petty. And on this 4th of July, we need to really raise it up a notch and take our jobs seriously, try to work together across party lines to try and actually solve these problems and make people's lives better.
I also want to go back to some of what we were talking about, some of these foreign policy challenges, and just in light of, on July 4th, North Korea launching what appears to be this intercontinental ballistic missile. You now have the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, requesting a UN Security Council meeting to deal with the issue. What are you hoping comes of that?
Well, you know, North Korea, I don't believe, would have acted without having actually discussed it with the Russians and the Chinese. And, you know, they're acting in a very concerted fashion. And we need to recognize that in this global world that we live in today, it's essential that we are continuing to build friendships with more allies of ours and demonstrate the solidity of our relationship with our allies.
But can I ask you real quick, just because you think they discussed it with, you think North Korea discussed it with the Chinese and the Russians, so do you have reason to believe, I mean, do you have reason to believe, other than assuming that would happen, that there was coordination between North Korea and Russia and China?
I have no specific information. I just don't believe that North Korea would act on its own in such a serious way with the G20 summit coming up. And it just so happens that we're going to have this bilateral negotiation with the Russians now. I mean, this is, you know, the 4th of July, G20, America and Russia. I mean, it's a little too convenient. So we have to recognize that we have to build relationships with our allies. That's why it's so important that the president demonstrate his commitment to our NATO alliances. I can understand why he wants to get more money from the different NATO members for them to participate more in carrying their weight and paying the bills, but he's got to demonstrate clearly our solid relationship with our NATO allies, more than he's done so up until this point. And he needs to lay out a strategy. I mean, think of all the complex things that are going on now between terrorism, between Syria, between Iran, between Russia, what's going on with Qatar and Yemen. I mean, there's so many, the famines in Africa. Think of all the different moving pieces that are going on in the international chessboard right now. America has to make sure that we are making more friends and trying to reduce our enemies. So this is what the president needs to do. I think a clearer job of articulating how he's going to foster those relationships.
All right, Congressman Tom Suozzi, we do appreciate your time on this 4th of July. A happy holiday to you, sir.
Thank you. Same to you, Brianna.
And we have a lot more coming up with that request from the U.S. for a UN Security Council meeting following what is really an unprecedented missile launch by North Korea. We're back in just a moment.